Jesus!
For my money, Fantastic Easter Special is one of the single best episodes of South Park ever produced. Airing just 4 days before Easter Sunday in 2007, this episode delivers an incredible holiday special in the form of a Da Vinci Code parody. But what's more, it is a genuinely hilarious and well-plotted conspiracy thriller in itself, finally explaining the confusing connection between bunnies, eggs, and Easter. On top of this conspiratorial package, it delivers poignant cultural commentary about the role of religion in our lives, and follows up on a classic South Park character's departure and sacrifice back in season 6 by featuring his triumphant resurrection. So for Easter, let's celebrate Jesus' return to South Park. I honestly don't hear a ton of hype for the Fantastic Easter Special in the South Park fandom, despite it being one of my absolute favorite episodes of the entire show. But one person who does share my enthusiasm for the episode is Trey Parker.
This is the Fantastic Easter Special, which is honestly maybe in my top 5 favorite episodes ever.
I think you can tell that this episode idea was inspired, because it all comes together in such a clean and satisfying way. Matt and Trey often talk about how some stories are a real pain to break and work out, but this is one that came to them on the Thursday before air and immediately felt fully formed.
It was just one of those rare shows where actually on Thursday I kind of knew where it was all headed and felt like, man, I could write like half of this show right now.
And I think part of this is likely because they had sort of been mulling over this idea for a while. This was a few years after the Da Vinci Code book released, and about a year after the Ron Howard directed film starring Tom Hanks made like $750 million at the box office.
And actually we had the idea for a while of doing a Easter Da Vinci Code, like, cause
yeah, we had that idea because that's that thing of like, why eggs?
Yeah.
And it's like kind of answering that question.
Why
Would
eggs?
die
Why eggs? Why a bunny? Why does he hide the eggs?
And the episode basically just starts immediately with this question. And I really like how this episode just dives in straight away. There's a ton of ground to cover, so the very first scene has Stan asking exactly that, and establishes Randy's excitement towards Easter and dying eggs, and his struggles to properly convey why the hell they do any of that.
I'm just saying that somewhere between Jesus dying on the cross and a giant bunny hiding eggs, there seems to be a gap of information.
I mean, this is such a fun question to pursue in this episode, because the way Easter is celebrated is such a bizarre aspect of modern culture. Bunnies don't lay eggs. Why would they hide them to celebrate the resurrection of Christ? It's all incredibly weird. And so the episode just immediately has Stan pursuing this question himself, and hints that Randy might know more than he's letting on.
Maybe he's figured out the Easter Bunny isn't real.
You know so little.
And I love that this moves into the conspiratorial aspect of the story so quickly. They really waste no time. Stan asks the mall Easter Bunny what the deal with Easter is, why they have these strange traditions, gets no real answers, and before minute 3 of the episode, the fact that it's a conspiracy is revealed.
We have a problem. Somebody's onto us.
Honestly, even though this is very funny in the context of the episode, can you imagine being followed home and chased by a gang of people in Easter Bunny costumes? That is genuinely terrifying. But the initial reveal is that these men, alongside Randy, are part of an ancient society that keeps the secret of the Easter Bunny.
I belong to a secret society that has been around for thousands of years. Our identities have to be protected.
Could you take off the ears, please?
I love this entire episode, but one of the absolute highlight sequences is at the actual hair club for men as they plan to induct Stan into the society. For one, turning the song Here Comes Peter Cottontail into a religious chant in Latin is genuinely one of the funniest and most inspired things to ever come out of South Park. Genuinely incredible. But even beyond that, Catholic Mass is filled with these seemingly strange rituals that are all done in this very dramatic, performative way. The sprinkling of the holy water, the recitings of specific prayers, communion itself, etc. And so to showcase aspects of Easter, like the painting of eggs, as part of these kinds of Catholic rituals is ingenious. Of course, before they reveal the secret of Easter to Stan, they're attacked by the president of the Catholic League, Bill Donahue, and his ninjas. We'll touch a lot more on him later, but the important thing here is that Randy entrusts Snowball the Bunny to Stan, and he escapes. There's a really small moment here that I appreciate so much, and it comes when Stan goes to Kyle's house for help. This episode is obviously this huge worldwide conspiracy story that Stan gets caught up in, and those kinds of stories can often feel a bit bigger than the typical South Park episode, especially back in this era of the show. When Stan goes to Kyle's, he quickly info dumps all of the insanity that he's currently dealing with, but Matt and Trey always know when to include a little moment that reminds us that these are just kids.
I'm kind of finger painting right now.
Gets me every time. Matt and Trey also talked a bit in the commentary about how they were able to nail the pacing for this episode.
Watching the Da Vinci Code, unfortunately, a couple of times and being like, wow, this is terrible. But we're able to learn from it.
They go on to talk about how the movie is kind of boring because it basically amounts to people standing around talking and then being chased somewhere else and then standing around talking, which works in a book but not really in a movie. And though this episode does follow this structure to a degree, it seems like they always manage to incorporate some action into the more expository scenes, so it doesn't just feel like info dump after info dump. They also talked about how those info dumps were probably the toughest aspect to nail for this episode.
The conspiracy part of it is so much more fun to talk about than to actually work into a story.
Yeah.
But we had to kind of make that conspiracy part where you found out that the whole kind of secret. I mean, we boiled it down to its like essential elements, but like we spent way too much time talking about this intricate conspiracy that would take years and years to explain in a show.
And the next scene is the most important expositional scene in the episode, the one that actually unveils the secret behind the conspiracy, about the true identity of the first pope.
In actuality, Peter wasn't a man at all. Saint Peter was a rabbit.
Peter Rabbit.
I mean, come on. Peter Rabbit, how could there be a better way to tie Easter to Catholicism? And much like the actual Da Vinci Code, all of the clues lie within the painting of the Last Supper. An egg on the table sitting in front of St. Peter and then revealing what Da Vinci originally painted as a member of the Hair Club for Men. And I mean, maybe the funniest reveal of all.
Proof is everywhere. Look at the Pope's hat. It makes no sense, except that it was originally designed for a rabbit.
It's honestly really impressive how succinct the unveiling of the details of this conspiracy is. This is like a 2-minute sequence and it gets all of the ideas across perfectly, which Matt and Trey claim they almost botched.
We had that, this scene in this where we reveal the whole thing about Peter, Cottontail, and Jesus, and that Da Vinci scene used to be probably 3 times longer.
Yeah,
than
way
it is
long.
now.
We had way more stuff.
Because you think you need to explain it and explain it and explain it, and then you just start cutting it and cutting it and cutting it, and you realize, no,
It's not
people
that hard
get
to
it.
get,
Yeah, it's not hard to get.
So at this point in the episode, I was already pretty blown away. The conspiracy angle works so well because it's both very stupid and funny, while the pieces make sense in the silliest ways. I mean, the hat, come on. But this is just a part of why this episode comes together so beautifully. And another big part is the cultural commentary about the role of the church in people's lives.
We decided to make the bad guy that Bill Donahue guy.
Yeah, that's right.
He and about 4 of his friends run this thing called the Catholic League.
Okay, let's talk about this asshole for a minute because, man, there are few people that suck as hard as Bill Donahue. He has a long history of whining about the portrayal of Catholicism in media. He's boycotted tons of different studios, complained about The Simpsons, Kevin Smith's film Dogma, even episodes of CSI. He's one of the main instigators of the War on Christmas cultural debate and has had a long-standing series of critiques aimed at Matt, Trey, and South Park. Matt and Trey talked a little bit more about why this guy was constantly given press for these kinds of stories.
They always go to Bill Donahue because he's the only guy that'll go on TV and be like, no, get these guys.
He has no authority. He is this kind of nobody guy.
Yeah.
He's just shameless enough and douchey enough to go on TV and bitch about it.
Just the year before this episode, he actually took specific aim at South Park for their Cartoon Wars episodes, which I've previously made a video about, claiming that Matt and Trey should have resigned when Comedy Central refused to show the image of Muhammad. And his quote here is, frankly, insane.
The ultimate hypocrite is not Comedy Central. That's their decision not to show the image of Muhammad or not. It's Parker and Stone. Like little whores, they'll sit there and grab the bucks. They'll sit there and they'll whine, and they'll take their shot at Jesus. That's their stock and trade.
This is a particularly stupid take because it completely ignores the entire point that the episode was making in the end, which was to point out the hypocrisy in how they were allowed to show Jesus do anything they wanted, but couldn't even show an image of Muhammad. Not a particularly smart man, Bill Donahue, but Matt and Trey really wanted to point out how people like this are actually doing more damage to the reputation of Christianity and Catholicism than they are defending it.
Tortured, but Bill, all this torturing and ninjas, it just doesn't seem very Christian.
They basically have Donahue usurp the Pope and become the new leader of Catholicism, which makes their next narrative decision in how they deal with Donahue all the more satisfying. But before we dive into it, let's talk about Jesus in South Park. This is another subject I've made an entire video about, but Jesus has a long history with the show, dating back to literally their first ever short, The Spirit of Christmas, in 1992. Jesus was basically just a full-on character in South Park for years, until season 6's finale, Red Sleigh Down, the incredible Christmas episode where Santa is shot down over Iraq, and Jesus and the boys need to go save him. In that episode, Jesus sacrifices himself for Santa, and since his death had not been seen in South Park. And so what better time to resurrect Jesus than in the fantastic Easter special, and of course, specifically to condemn Bill Donahue.
It is what Christ would have wanted! Who are you to say that?
God, I love this He Is Risen song so much. It gets stuck in my head entirely too often. But this is such a funny and satisfying sequence, and honestly, as someone who is not Christian, it's funny how emotional and epic it feels to have Jesus return here, just for his place in South Park lore. But Jesus returns to try and set the record straight about St. Peter and the Pope, which of course gets a fitting response from Bill Donahue.
Kill him. What? He goes against the church. He must die. All right, that does it, Bill. I'm pretty sure that killing Jesus is not very Christian.
They really give it to Bill here, and I think it makes some pretty great commentary about more vocal Christians that resonates even today. Not about all Christians, obviously, but many have become so dogmatic and militant that they've just strayed so far from the things that Jesus himself said and did. So it's pretty funny commentary to have one of the most vocal Catholics literally imprison Jesus and sentence him to death because he disagrees with him. This episode is also just a few years after the infamous Passion of the Jew episode, in a period of time where Cartman was very militant towards Kyle after being influenced by the Passion of the Christ, which makes this sequence where Jesus asks Kyle to kill him so that he can resurrect outside of the jail pretty hilarious within the context of the show.
Eric Cartman can never know about this.
And maybe even funnier to have Jesus then resurrect and take care of Bill Donahue himself.
I am the voice of God! Not anymore. I'm removing you from your position.
It does feel like taking aim at South Park is just never a smart idea. Donahue was pretty thoroughly dressed down here, but I also think that he's the type of guy who this kind of lambasting doesn't really get through to. Parker wasn't even sure they should directly address him at first.
And we actually didn't even want to give him the credit of like being on the show.
And honestly, I really understand Trey's initial instinct here, even though this episode turned out so damn well, particularly given Donahue's actual response to the episode. After it aired, he allegedly kept a framed still of his South Park character model in full papal regalia on a shelf in his office. And he sort of talks about the episode fondly.
In the episode, they have me overthrow the Pope because the Pope is a wimp. And then I take over the church and give it some guts. But in the end, Jesus kills me.
Not exactly sure if it's a great look for the head of the Catholic League to be excitedly displaying an image of himself as the Pope and gleefully recounting the story where he replaces the Pope because he was a wimp and he needed to give the church some guts. Just an impressively tone-deaf man. Personally, I think I'd prefer the rabbit's advice on how to live.
It isn't saying anything. Yes, just as Jesus intended it.
The way everything comes together in this episode is just unreasonably satisfying. The absolutely hysterical and ingenious Pope Peter Rabbit Da Vinci Code parody, the cultural commentary fueled by a classic South Park personal vendetta, and of course, the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. One of the funniest aspects of Jesus' death episode, Red Sleigh Down, was this message at the end.
From now on, Christmas will be a day for remembering a brave man named Jesus.
Which is funny for obvious reasons, given why Christmas is celebrated. But I love that Fantastic Easter Special sort of continues this tradition in re-establishing an already Jesus-focused holiday for a new South Park-related reason, which is to say that Easter will always be remembered as the day Jesus resurrected, so that he could reappoint a rabbit as the Pope and kill Bill Donahue. Happy Easter, everyone.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.